USC professor possessed by demonic manual Chapter 1. Awakening of Curiosity. The University of Southern California, with its sprawling campus and diverse student body, was a place of rigorous academia and unending curiosities. Students traversed from one building to another, their conversations merging with the rustling leaves of old trees. Dr. Henry Laurent, an esteemed professor of anthropology, had always been a figure of respect. With graying temples and a trimmed beard, he had a presence that commanded attention. The university corridors buzzed with anticipation. Dr. Laurent, after years of studying indigenous cultures, was offering a new course, one that promised a deep dive into the intricate weave of magic, witchcraft, and the supernatural in American history. His office was an oasis of organized chaos. Tribal masks, pottery fragments, and a vast array of books encompassed the space. He eagerly reviewed the materials he'd painstakingly collected over months for the course. Among them, an ancient demonological manual with a cover made of worn leather stood out. It had come from a private collector on the East Coast who'd warned Henry of its unnerving aura, but the professor had laughed it off as a sales gimmick. As he traced the embossed pentagram on the manual, a shiver ran down his spine. The dim light from his desk lamp made the pages appear almost alive. The script danced in a language that was alien yet vaguely familiar, an old form of Latin interspersed with symbols and drawings. Strange illustrations depicted ceremonies, summonings, and dark rites. Engrossed, Dr. Laurent lost track of time. When his antique clock chimed midnight, a gust of wind blew through the window, extinguishing the lamp. The room plunged into darkness. He could swear he heard a whisper, a soft hiss that murmured his name. Shaking off the unease, he relit the lamp and carefully placed the manual back into its box. Perhaps, he mused, there's more to this book than mere folklore. The next morning, his lecture hall was packed. Word had spread about Dr. Laurent's groundbreaking course, and students from various disciplines filled the room, their faces a blend of excitement and trepidation. As we embark on this journey, Dr. Laurent began, his voice deep and resonant, I want you to keep an open mind. What we'll explore is not just the history of magic and witchcraft, but its very essence, its heartbeat. The evolution from ancient charms to modern-day rituals, the persecution of witches in early America, and the demonological manuals that guided those witch hunts. He held up the aged manual, its mere presence silencing the room. This, he said, is one of the rarest demonological scripts. A manual that has seen centuries, perhaps passed down through generations of occultists. Handle it with care, for its pages tell tales darker than the darkest night. A murmur of intrigue swept the room. Some were clearly skeptical, others visibly perturbed, but most were captivated. Jenna, a third-year history major with a penchant for the occult, felt an inexplicable pull. Can I take a closer look, Professor? She asked, her blue eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Of course, replied Dr. Laurent, handing over the manual. As Jenna's fingers brushed against its cover, she felt a jolt, as if a dormant energy had been awakened. The symbols seemed to shift, the script appearing more pronounced. She quickly handed it back, her face pale. It's intense, she managed to say. That it is, Dr. Laurent agreed, a hint of mystery in his eyes. This course will challenge you, intrigue you, and perhaps even frighten you. But by the end, you will see the world of magic and witchcraft with new eyes. The lecture continued, but an electric charge lingered in the air, the manual's presence almost palpable. After the students dispersed, Dr. Laurent sat in contemplation. The manual, it seemed, was exerting an influence, not just on him, but on everyone who came into contact with it. The events of the previous night played in his mind, the sudden darkness, the whisper, the sense of being watched. He felt an overwhelming desire to delve deeper into the manual's mysteries, to unlock its secrets. Unknown to him, in the farthest corner of the room, a shadow flickered and disappeared. The journey had begun, and the University of Southern California would never be the same again. Chapter 2. Echoes from the past. The autumn sun descended in the horizon, casting the USC campus in a golden hue. The historic buildings reflected the light, their bricks gleaming. The evening's beauty, however, was marred by an eerie atmosphere that gripped the campus, an unsettling energy emanating from the heart of Dr. Lawrence Lecture Hall. Rumors about the mysterious Demonological manual spread like wildfire. Tales of students feeling overwhelmed, hearing strange whispers, or seeing fleeting shadows after coming into contact with it became commonplace. The campus, usually abuzz with enthusiasm, now bore a thick air of trepidation. Jenna, still recovering from her encounter with the manual, confided in her close friend, Marcus. A computer science major with a logical mind, he was her rock during trying times. They met in the main library, its vast hallways providing some comfort against the rising tide of dread. "That book," Jenna began, her voice barely above a whisper, "there's something malevolent about it. When I touched it, I felt this coldness seep into me. And last night, Marcus, I swear I heard whispers in my room." Marcus took a deep breath. "Look, we're at one of the most prestigious universities. There's no room for superstition. Maybe it's just the hype around the book, or perhaps you're more stressed than you realize." She looked deep into his eyes, searching for some reassurance. "I want to believe that. But I can't shake off the feeling that we've awakened something that should have stayed dormant." Marcus pondered. "If you're genuinely concerned, let's research it. Let's dig into its history, its origins. Perhaps understanding its past might help ease your mind." Together, they delved deep into the archives, poring over ancient records, manuscripts, and newspapers. Hours turned into days. Their quest for knowledge was punctuated by coffee breaks and hushed conversations. Marcus, being tech-savvy, also used specialized software to decode any encrypted information related to the manual. One evening, they stumbled upon a torn journal entry from the early 1700s. It spoke of a mysterious manual tied to witch hunts in Salem. The writer, a reverend, detailed how the book brought doom wherever it went, families torn apart, individuals possessed, and towns left in ruin. He wrote of his attempts to destroy the manual, but it resisted every effort, even fire. His last entry was cryptic: "To those who find this, beware the manual's dark allure. It seeks not to enlighten but to consume." Jenna felt a chill. This is exactly what I feared. Marcus, ever the skeptic, interjected, while intriguing, "This could be mere folklore." There were many such tales during the witch trials. Jenna responded, "But what if it's not? What if Dr. Laurent has brought something genuinely evil onto the campus?" A realization dawned upon Marcus. We need to speak to him. Make him aware. Maybe he doesn't realize what he's dealing with. However, reaching Dr. Laurent was easier said than done. His behavior had become increasingly erratic. Colleagues whispered about his intense obsession with the manual, spending hours locked in his office. Those who managed to catch a glimpse spoke of his haggard appearance, with dark circles under his eyes. Undeterred, Marcus and Jenna decided to confront him directly. They reached his office late in the evening. The corridor was silent, save for the distant hum of a janitor's vacuum. Jenna knocked softly, then more forcefully, but there was no response. Marcus tried the doorknob, and to their surprise, it turned, revealing a dimly lit room. Dr. Laurent sat hunched over his desk, the manual open before him. Candles, their flames flickering, cast eerie shadows on the walls. Strange symbols, reminiscent of those in the manual, were drawn in chalk on the floor, creating a protective circle around the desk. "Professor?" Jenna ventured, her voice shaking. Without lifting his head, Dr. Laurent whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Marcus stepped forward. "Sir, we're worried about you, about the campus. That manual, it's dangerous." Dr. Laurent looked up, his eyes hollow, devoid of the warmth they once held. "You have no idea what you're meddling with. This isn't just a book, it's a gateway. And now, it's open." Jenna, her heart racing, pleaded, "Please, let's get rid of it. Let's keep everyone safe." A cold laughter erupted from Dr. Laurent, sending shivers down their spines. "It's too late for that." From the room's shadowy corners, whispers grew louder, echoing ancient chants. The protective circle around Dr. Laurent started glowing, its chalk symbols pulsating with energy. The room grew colder, the very air thickening. In a final act of defiance, or perhaps a momentary return of his old self, Dr. Laurent yelled, "Run! Save yourselves!" Without a second thought, Marcus grabbed Jenna's hand, pulling her out of the room. They raced down the corridor, the eerie chants chasing them, growing louder and more frantic. As they burst into the open air, the campus alarm bells began to ring, their toll echoing a warning that reverberated across the vast grounds. Darkness had descended upon the University of Southern California, and an ancient evil had been awakened. The battle had just begun. Chapter 3. Shrouded in shadows, the alarm bells sent a wave of panic through USC. From dormitories to research labs, a flurry of activity ensued as students and faculty rushed to identify the cause of the sudden disturbance. Marcus and Jenna emerged into the night, their breaths visible in the frosty air. Marcus, taking charge, steered Jenna towards a small chapel nestled on the outskirts of the campus. The old stone building, with its towering spire and ancient stained glass windows, stood as a sanctuary amidst the chaos. Inside, the chapel was dimly lit by candlelight, the warm glow casting patterns on the wooden pews. Jenna sank into one, trying to steady her racing heart. Marcus quickly went about locking the heavy wooden door behind them and drew the drapes. "We need a plan," he whispered. Jenna nodded, her face pale. "We need to find a way to trap the entity from the manual or send it back." Just then, the heavy wooden doors thudded, the reverberation echoing through the chapel. Shadows slid beneath the door, trying to find an entry point. Jenna and Marcus exchanged horrified glances. The entity was after them. "There's something I didn't tell you," Jenna began, her voice trembling. "When I touched the manual, I saw a vision, a ritual that can seal away dark entities." Marcus frowned. "Why didn't you mention this before?" "I wasn't sure it was real," Jenna admitted. "But now, we have no choice but to trust it." Gathering their courage, they started preparing for the ritual. Marcus gathered the necessary items from the chapel: salt, holy water, and candles, while Jenna sketched an intricate pentagram at the center of the room. As they worked, the shadows grew more restless, the thudding on the doors increasing in intensity. Finally, with everything in place, Jenna began to recite the incantation. Her voice, soft at first, grew louder, more confident. The shadows recoiled, as though repelled by an unseen force. The chapel's interior grew colder, the candles flickering violently. Marcus poured a circle of salt around them, adding another layer of protection. Minutes felt like hours. Jenna's voice began to waver, her energy waning. Marcus, seeing her struggle, joined in, his deep voice complementing her own. The combined force of their chant amplified, sending waves of energy throughout the chapel. Suddenly, a blinding light emanated from the center of the pentagram, illuminating the chapel. The shadows, writhing in pain, were drawn towards it, spiraling into a vortex of light. With a final scream, they vanished, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. Marcus and Jenna collapsed, exhaustion overtaking them. The danger, for now, seemed to have passed. It was dawn when they awoke. The first rays of sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting a kaleidoscope of colors across the chapel. They shared a look of relief, the weight of the night's events still fresh in their minds. "We did it," Jenna whispered, her voice hoarse. Marcus nodded. "We managed to repel the entity." "But what about Dr. Laurent?" The two quickly made their way back to his office. The scene that greeted them was one of devastation. Papers were strewn about, books torn, and the manual lay open on the floor. Dr. Laurent was nowhere to be found. Jenna carefully approached the manual, a sense of dread enveloping her. As she closed it, she noticed a note scribbled hastily on Dr. Laurent's desk. "To those who find this, the manual's power is beyond comprehension. It's a door to a world we aren't meant to see. In trying to understand it, I've unleashed something terrible. I fear it's taken a part of me. Protect the manual at all costs. And if I don't return, remember me not for my mistakes but for my passion for knowledge." With hope, Dr. Laurent Jenna felt tears sting her eyes. They had managed to repel the shadows, but at what cost? The campus was abuzz with rumors. The alarm bells, the late-night disturbances, Dr. Laurent's sudden disappearance, all became topics of hushed discussions. Amidst the chaos, Jenna and Marcus decided on a course of action. The manual had to be protected. They placed it in a secure vault in the library's basement, with multiple layers of protection. However, as days turned into weeks, a palpable tension remained. Students reported seeing fleeting shadows, hearing soft whispers, and feeling sudden cold drafts. As Jenna gazed out of her dorm window one evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. The entity, though weakened, was still present, lurking in the shadows, biding its time. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, a silhouette stood watching from a distance, its intentions unknown. The University of Southern California, once a place of academia and dreams, was now shrouded in mysteries and nightmares. Chapter 4. Whispers in the Walls. USC was no longer just a prestigious seat of learning. It had become the nexus of whispers, rumors, and unsettling occurrences. Classes continued, but an undercurrent of anxiety pervaded the lecture halls. Students traveled in groups. The library was seldom visited after dark, and more than one student confessed to hearing odd sounds echoing in the corridors. Jenna and Marcus became somewhat of a paradox, whispered about, yet sought after. Their confrontation with the entity in the chapel had not gone unnoticed, and stories of their heroic act were now campus legend. But Jenna felt far from a hero. Every creak in her dormitory, every rustle of paper, made her heart race. One evening, as Jenna was working late in one of the computer labs, she felt it again, that sudden drop in temperature, the hint of a shadow just at the edge of her vision. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice echoing slightly. There was no response. A sudden message popped onto her computer screen: "You cannot hide." Startled, she looked around, but the room was empty. Packing her belongings, she decided it was best to leave. As she made her way down the dimly lit corridor, she heard it, a soft, almost melodic whisper. "It wants to be known," the voice seemed to say. Jenna picked up her pace, nearly sprinting to the exit. Marcus, on the other hand, was determined to find a solution. He had been digging into the university's archives, searching for any record of the manual or similar incidents in the past. In a dusty corner, he found a box labeled "Restricted." Inside was a collection of old newspapers, journals, and what looked like a diary. The diary belonged to a former professor named Eliza Harrington, dated back to the early 1900s. Eliza wrote about discovering a forbidden tome and the eerie events that followed. She described a shadowy figure that stalked her, haunting whispers and a growing dread. Marcus's hands trembled as he read an entry dated October 17, 1908. The entity from the manual is not alone. It's a gateway, a bridge to the other side. I've tried to seal it, but it's resilient. It seeks recognition, a voice. My energy drains with each passing day. I fear I won't be able to resist much longer. There it was, a piece of the puzzle. The entity didn't just want to exist. It wanted recognition, to be acknowledged. As the days turned into nights and the nights became days, the duo tried to decipher Eliza's notes. A pattern emerged. The entity grew stronger when ignored and seemed to diminish when acknowledged. But how could they use this information? Jenna had an idea. They would host a seminar, presenting their findings on the manual, the entity, and its history. If the entity sought recognition, they would give it an audience. Word spread quickly, and soon, a date was set. The university's largest auditorium was chosen as the venue, its expansive space now the stage for a confrontation with the unseen. On the evening of the seminar, the auditorium was packed. Jenna and Marcus stood backstage, going over their notes, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on them. The lights dimmed, and Jenna took a deep breath before stepping onto the stage. As she began to speak, sharing their findings, Marcus played audio recordings of the whispers and showed images of the shadowy figure captured on campus security cameras. The atmosphere in the auditorium grew heavy. Some students looked visibly shaken, while others whispered among themselves. And then, right in the middle of Jenna's presentation, it happened. The auditorium lights flickered and then went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. Panic ensued as people screamed and scrambled to find exits. Amidst the chaos, Jenna's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "We acknowledge you. We see you. You are known." There was a pause, a moment of stillness. And then, a soft glow began to emanate from the stage. The entity, no longer just a shadow, took form. It was an amorphous shape, shifting and changing, but its presence was undeniable. As Jenna continued to speak, the entity began to diminish, its form becoming less defined, the glow less intense. And then, with a final, ear-splitting shriek, it vanished. The lights came back on, revealing a shaken but unharmed audience. Jenna and Marcus received a standing ovation, but the gravity of the situation wasn't lost on anyone. The next day, the university announced a temporary shutdown to assess the situation and provide counseling to affected students. Jenna and Marcus, exhausted but determined, knew their work wasn't done. The manual, though secured, was still a potential threat. They needed to find a way to ensure that the entity, or entities, it could summon would never return. But for now, they took solace in the fact that they had faced the unknown and emerged victorious. But in the depths of the library, in the secure vault where the manual lay, a page turned on its own, revealing an ominous phrase. The first has been acknowledged, but many still remain. Chapter 5. The Vault of Forgotten Horrors. The university, once a bastion of knowledge and dreams, now bore an unsettling silence. The faculty and students who remained tried to push forward, but the atmosphere was thick with trepidation. Whispers of the entity and the event in the auditorium ran rampant. In a quiet corner of campus, Jenna and Marcus conferred in hushed tones. The manual, now recognized as a catalyst of dark energies, couldn't be left unchecked. Their encounter with the entity had given them a glimpse of its power, but the turning page in the vault was a stark reminder that they were not done. "We need to get into that vault," Marcus whispered, his brow furrowed. "There might be clues in the manual itself. Something we've missed." Jenna hesitated, the memory of the last encounter still fresh. "We have to be careful. Every time we engage with it, we're playing with fire." But Marcus was insistent, and Jenna knew he was right. They needed answers. The two made their way to the university's archive, a sprawling space filled with aging documents, books, and curiosities. At its heart was the vault, a room with reinforced walls and a single heavy door, designed to protect the most valuable and dangerous items in the collection. As they approached, Jenna felt a cold draft. "Did you feel that?" she whispered, her voice tinged with apprehension. Marcus nodded, pressing his hand against the vault door. It was ice cold. The pair exchanged a worried glance. This wasn't right. Using a key they had borrowed, with a bit of persuasion, from the head librarian, they unlocked the vault. The door swung open with an eerie creak, revealing the dimly lit room beyond. It was chaos. Shelves overturned, papers scattered, and at the center of it all lay the manual, open, its pages fluttering as if caught in an invisible breeze. They approached cautiously, Jenna pulling out a small device designed to detect any spiritual activity. Its lights flickered erratically, confirming their suspicions. Marcus gingerly picked up the manual. As he did, a rush of wind surged around them, papers flying, and the lights flickering. He began to read the open page. In the shadows, they wait, forgotten by time. Only by acknowledging them can they be set free. "There's a ritual here," Marcus said, scanning the text. "It says something about a circle of salt, candles, and—" His voice trailed off, his expression turning grave. "What is it?" Jenna asked, her eyes darting to the manual. "It says we need a vessel." Understanding dawned on Jenna. The entity, or entities, required a host. They couldn't just be banished. They had to be contained. "We can't do it," Jenna said with finality. "It's too dangerous." But Marcus, ever the scholar, saw another angle. What if we could trap it in an object? Some sort of containment? They brainstormed, scouring the archives and researching. Hours turned into days. They discovered tales of ancient relics that held great power, objects that could bind spirits or demons. In a tattered journal from the 1700s, Jenna stumbled upon the tale of a mirror, rumored to have been crafted by a master alchemist. It had the power to trap souls, rendering them powerless. It was their best shot. The hunt for the mirror began. The pair journeyed to dark antique shops, consulted with obscure historians, and delved into the university's private collections. Their efforts led them to an estate sale of a deceased occultist. In the attic of the old mansion, covered in layers of dust, they found it. The mirror was ornate, its silver frame intricately designed with symbols that both recognized as protection sigils. But the glass itself was black, as if it absorbed all light. They procured the mirror and returned to the university, setting up in the auditorium where they had last faced the entity. With the manual as their guide, they created a circle of salt, lit the required candles, and placed the mirror at the center. As they began chanting the incantation from the manual, the atmosphere grew heavy. Shadows twisted and danced, converging on the mirror. An otherworldly scream echoed, the entities resisting their imprisonment. But Jenna and Marcus held firm, their voices rising, overpowering the chaos. And then, with a blinding flash, it was over. The mirror's glass was no longer black but showed their own reflections, the shadows trapped within. Exhausted but victorious, the pair decided to keep the mirror in the vault, guarded and protected. The university returned to normal, the events fading into campus legend. But in the quiet of the night, if one were to venture close to the vault, they would hear it, the softest of whispers, promises of shadows waiting for their moment to break free. Chapter 6. Whispers in the dark. Weeks passed since the event in the auditorium. Students returned to their daily routines, and professors resumed their lectures, eager to put the past behind them. But not everyone could forget so easily. Jenna and Marcus, the silent heroes of that harrowing night, were haunted by a question that gnawed at their souls. Had they truly succeeded, or had they merely delayed the inevitable? One fateful evening, as Jenna left the library, she thought she caught a glimpse of someone, or something, tailing her. Dismissing it as her own paranoia, she continued on, only to hear a faint whisper. "Release us." It seemed to plead. Quickening her pace, she could feel the weight of unseen eyes on her. As she neared her dormitory, a chilling gust of wind blew, extinguishing the streetlights and shrouding the campus in darkness. Heart pounding, Jenna fumbled for her phone, trying to turn on the flashlight. Suddenly, a figure appeared before her. It was ethereal, shifting between human and shadow, eyes glowing with a malevolent fire. Panicking, Jenna raced to her dormitory, locking the door behind her. Breathless, she tried to make sense of what had just transpired. Could the entity have somehow escaped the mirror? Or was this something else altogether? She called Marcus, recounting her harrowing experience. He listened intently, the gravity of the situation evident in his voice. "Jenna," he began cautiously, "I think it's time we seek help from the outside. This is bigger than us." They agreed to consult Dr. Eleanor Redwood, a renowned expert in ancient artifacts and occultism. Eleanor, a petite, silver-haired woman in her late 60s, had a reputation for being eccentric but brilliant. The next day, at her residence, she greeted them with a warm smile, her home filled with a vast collection of books, scrolls, and peculiar artifacts. After hearing their account, she inspected the mirror, her expression turning grave. "This mirror," she began, "is both a blessing and a curse. While it can trap entities, it also serves as a beacon, attracting other spirits and demons." Marcus frowned. "But we followed the ritual to the letter." Eleanor nodded, "And you did well. But there are forces in this world that are constantly evolving, always seeking ways to break free. The mirror's containment is strong, but it's not impenetrable." Jenna shivered. "What do we do now?" Eleanor hesitated for a moment. "There's a ritual, an ancient one, known to strengthen barriers. But it requires certain ingredients, some of which are quite rare." Without hesitation, Jenna and Marcus agreed. They would gather these ingredients, no matter the cost. Eleanor provided them with a list: the feather of a raven touched by moonlight, the tear of a banshee, and the heartwood of an elder tree that had witnessed a century. The duo embarked on their quest, journeying to forgotten forests, haunted moors, and ancient burial grounds. Each ingredient presented its own challenge. From confronting a mournful banshee to climbing the oldest tree under the moon's silvery glow, they faced both physical and emotional trials. After what felt like an eternity, they returned to Dr. Redwood with the ingredients in tow. She praised their tenacity and began preparing for the ritual. The room was cast in a dim light, candles illuminating ancient symbols drawn on the floor. At the center, the mirror stood, reflecting the room's eerie glow. The ritual began, Eleanor chanting in a language long forgotten. Jenna and Marcus joined in, their voices melding with hers, rising in a crescendo. The air became dense, electric, as if charged with an unseen force. The mirror shimmered, its surface rippling like water. Suddenly, a deafening scream filled the room, the mirror cracking. Shadows poured forth, swirling, trying to break free. But the trio held firm, their chant unwavering. With a final, resounding note, a blinding light filled the room. When the light faded, The mirror stood intact, its surface calm. The entities trapped within seemed pacified, their whispers silenced. Exhausted but triumphant, Eleanor spoke. The mirror is now fortified. But remember, nothing is eternal. Always be vigilant. Jenna and Marcus thanked her, their bond strengthened by the ordeal they'd faced together. The mirror returned to the vault, now under strict surveillance. The campus slowly returned to its peaceful rhythm. But in the stillness of the night, Jenna often found herself gazing at the moon, wondering about the mysteries of the universe and the thin veil that separated their world from the unknown. Chapter 7. The Scholar's Warning. The newly fortified mirror, along with the unspeakable events that had occurred, slowly faded into the realm of campus legend at USC. But for those involved, the memory remained as vivid as ever, an ever-present shadow lurking just beneath the surface of their daily lives. Midterms approached, and the academic rigors pulled Jenna and Marcus back into the embrace of their studies. Jenna found herself immersed in her anthropology course, captivated by the various cultures, rituals, and the blurred lines between superstition and reality. But one particular afternoon, as she was buried in her textbook, a handwritten note slipped from between its pages. It read, "Meet me in the Armand Hammer Building, room 201, tonight at 9 p.m. It's about the mirror. Dr. Elias." Jenna was taken aback. Dr. Benjamin Elias was a prominent figure in the field of anthropology, well respected and recognized across the country for his work on ancient rituals and occult practices. Why would he want to meet her? And how did he know about the mirror? Feeling a mix of apprehension and curiosity, Jenna reached out to Marcus, sharing her discovery. Marcus, ever the voice of reason, recommended caution. "It could be a trap, Jenna. We don't know what or who we're dealing with." But Jenna was resolute. She had to know more. Nightfall draped the campus, the ancient buildings casting long shadows. Jenna approached the Armand Hammer Building, the history and significance of the structure weighing heavily on her as she entered. Room 201 echoed with silence, save for a dim light emanating from within. Upon entering, Jenna was met with the sight of Dr. Elias, seated behind an ornate desk cluttered with old manuscripts and books. His eyes, sharp yet weary, assessed her before motioning for her to sit. "Miss Jenna," he began, his voice holding an edge of urgency. "I am aware of your recent encounter with that accursed mirror. While the immediate danger might seem past, I fear the worst is yet to come." Jenna, taken aback, responded, "How do you know about the mirror, Dr. Elias?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Because, my dear, that mirror has haunted my family for generations. It is not merely a relic but a harbinger of doom." Jenna, her skepticism evident, retorted, "But we've fortified it." Dr. Redwood ensured its containment. Dr. Elias's laugh, dry and humorless, echoed in the chamber. "Containment? Child, some things are beyond mere rituals and chants. The mirror is a nexus, a focal point for ancient powers beyond our comprehension." He proceeded to share his family's history, detailing the mirror's grim origin. It had been crafted by his ancestor, a misguided alchemist who sought to harness the powers of the netherworld. But instead of control, it unleashed unspeakable horrors upon the world. "My ancestor paid the price with his life," Dr. Elias continued, "and the mirror has been our family's curse ever since. I brought it to USC, hoping to study and perhaps find a way to destroy it. But now, its power has grown, and I fear what it might unleash next." Jenna, shaken by the revelation, asked, "What can we do?" Dr. Elias, his gaze distant, whispered, "I've been researching a ritual, one far older and more potent than any known to modern scholars. But it's dangerous, and I cannot do it alone." He handed Jenna a tattered scroll, its edges frayed and ink faded. This details the rite. I need you and Marcus, the two who have faced the mirror's evil and survived. Jenna hesitated, the weight of the responsibility pressing down on her. But the thought of the impending danger galvanized her resolve. We'll help, Dr. Elias. We have to. As she left the room, the night felt darker, more oppressive. Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against time, that the mirror's next awakening might bring about a cataclysm beyond their wildest fears. Little did she know how right she was. Chapter 8. In the shadow of rituals, the next few days blurred into an intense whirlwind of preparation. Marcus, Jenna, and Dr. Elias pored over ancient texts and manuscripts, seeking information to perform the ritual that could neutralize the mirror's power. It wasn't just a matter of reading and understanding. It was a matter of belief, of tapping into a force that predated the known history of mankind. The chosen venue for the ritual was an old, underground chamber beneath the university's library. According to Dr. Elias, this particular chamber was constructed on a ley line, a supposed alignment of ancient sites with powerful mystical energy. Jenna had initially been skeptical, but her recent experiences had opened her mind to a world beyond what was tangible and known. As they descended into the chamber, Jenna could feel a subtle shift in the air. It was cooler, charged with an unseen energy that tingled her spine. The chamber itself was circular, with inscriptions carved into the stone walls that shimmered in the dim candlelight. At the center lay a stone altar, atop which the mirror would be placed. Dr. Elias unpacked various ritualistic items: a ceremonial dagger with a jeweled hilt, a chalice filled with an iridescent liquid, and a silver censer emitting a fragrant smoke. He also laid out the scroll, which was to guide them through the ritual. It was written in an archaic script, but Dr. Elias had translated most of it during their preparation. Before they began, Dr. Elias addressed them with a somber tone. I must stress the importance of absolute focus and belief. Any doubt, any hesitation, and we risk not only failure but potentially strengthening the mirror's power. Marcus and Jenna exchanged an anxious glance but nodded in agreement. They took their positions around the altar, with Dr. Elias at the head, guiding them through the initial incantations. The language was unfamiliar, but the rhythm was hypnotic, and Jenna found herself drawn into the cadence of the words. As the ritual progressed, the atmosphere in the chamber intensified. The inscriptions on the walls began to glow, illuminating the chamber in an ethereal light. The ground beneath them vibrated, a low hum resonating through the stone and into their very bones. Jenna felt both an overwhelming sense of dread and a powerful surge of energy, as if the very fabric of reality was being torn and rewoven around them. At the ritual's climax, Dr. Elias raised the dagger, chanting louder and faster. The mirror on the altar began to glow, an inner light pulsing in time with their heartbeats. Then, with a swift motion, Dr. Elias slashed his palm with the dagger and let his blood drip onto the mirror's surface. For a moment, there was absolute silence, as if the world had collectively held its breath. And then, without warning, the mirror erupted in a blinding light, casting the chamber into sharp relief. The ground trembled violently, and the inscriptions on the wall began to bleed, their luminescent liquid pooling onto the floor. The force of the eruption threw Jenna and Marcus back, but Dr. Elias remained standing, his face twisted in a grimace of pain and determination. He shouted the final words of the ritual, his voice booming and echoing in the chamber. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The light faded, the ground stilled, and the room plunged into darkness, save for the dim glow of the candles. The trio took a moment to catch their breath, their minds reeling from the intensity of the ritual. The mirror now lay dormant on the altar, its surface cloudy and inert. It seemed they had succeeded. But as they made their way out of the chamber, Jenna couldn't shake off an uneasy feeling. The mirror might be neutralized, but at what cost? And had they truly broken its power, or merely lulled it into a temporary slumber? As they ascended the steps back to the main library, Jenna's thoughts were interrupted by a distant, echoing laugh, cold and malevolent. The sound sent shivers down her spine, a grim reminder that their battle with the unknown was far from over. Chapter 9. Echoes from the past. Jenna's dreams that night were vivid and haunting, filled with disjointed fragments that twisted and turned, refusing to settle into coherence. In one, she stood atop a hill, looking down on a massive pyre where the mirror floated, crackling and blazing, its reflection sending an army of shadowy figures into the night. In another, she wandered through a maze of mirrors, each one reflecting a different version of her, all of them crying out in terror. She woke up with a start, sweat drenching her skin, the afterimages of her nightmares lingering in her vision. It took a moment to get her bearings and remember she was in her campus apartment. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the curtains. For a brief second, Jenna was tempted to go back to sleep, but the thought of facing those nightmares again kept her awake. Rising, she padded over to her desk and opened her laptop. Perhaps diving into her research would provide a distraction, a way to push away the unsettling dreams. But as the device hummed to life, a video chat request popped up on her screen. The user ID was unfamiliar, a string of numbers and symbols. Hesitating for a moment, curiosity got the better of her, and she clicked accept. The screen flickered to reveal an elderly woman, her face lined with age, but her eyes sharp and penetrating. She wore an elaborate headdress, adorned with gemstones and feathers, and her attire suggested she was of Native American descent. The background was indistinct, a blur of swirling colors and shadows. Jenna, the woman spoke, her voice soft but firm. "I've been waiting for you." Jenna blinked in surprise. "Who are you? How do you know my name?" The woman smiled, her lips barely moving. "Names hold power, child. And I've known yours for a very long time. You can call me Neil, a keeper of stories and histories. And I believe our paths are intertwined." Jenna's mind raced. Was this some kind of prank? A student's idea of a joke? But the gravity in Neil's eyes suggested otherwise. "Why did you contact me?" Neil's gaze deepened. "The mirror you've encountered is older than you can imagine. Its origins trace back to my ancestors, created as a vessel to trap malevolent spirits. But over time, its power grew, fed by the fears and desires of those who sought to wield it. And now, it threatens to unleash chaos." Jenna swallowed hard. "We tried to neutralize it. We performed a ritual." Neil nodded. "I know. And while you've managed to subdue it temporarily, the mirror's power is not so easily diminished. You've merely angered the spirits within." Jenna's heart sank. "Then what do we do?" Neil hesitated, her gaze distant, as if recalling a memory from long ago. "There is a way. But it will not be easy. The mirror needs to be taken to its place of origin, to the heart of my ancestral lands. There, a ritual must be performed during the night of the blood moon, when the veil between worlds is thinnest." Jenna frowned. "That's in 2 weeks." Neil nodded. "Yes. Time is of the essence. But be warned, the journey will be treacherous. The spirits within the mirror will do everything in their power to stop you." Jenna hesitated, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. "Can you guide us? Help us perform the ritual?" A sad smile crossed Neil's lips. "I cannot leave my realm. But I can provide you with the knowledge and tools you'll need. The rest will be up to you." As dawn began to break, Jenna sat with Neil, absorbing the intricate details of the upcoming ritual and the journey ahead. The path would take them through ancient forests, across sacred lands, facing challenges both physical and spiritual. By the time the sun rose, Jenna felt a mix of determination and trepidation. She knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger, but she also understood the stakes. The mirror's power was a ticking time bomb, and they were the only ones who could stop it. She met up with Marcus and Dr. Elias later that day, relaying everything Neil had told her. Together, they began preparations, gathering supplies, and mapping out their route. They understood the magnitude of their mission, and while fear gnawed at the edges of their minds, they also felt a sense of purpose, a drive to see this through to the end. As night fell, Jenna stood by her window, gazing at the crescent moon. The weight of the coming days pressed down on her, but she took solace in the thought that they weren't alone. Neil, and perhaps other forces unseen, were guiding them. And with that in mind, Jenna steeled herself for the journey ahead, ready to face whatever challenges lay in wait. Chapter 10. The Whispering Woods. As dawn painted the horizon, Jenna, Marcus, and Dr. Elias found themselves at the edge of a dense, ancient forest. Giant trees with gnarled trunks stretched high into the sky, their canopies intertwining to form a near-impenetrable mesh of leaves and branches. Beneath them, a tangle of underbrush and shadow waited, the path ahead obscured by mists that seemed to breathe with the forest itself. The trio had been driving since the early hours, the looming trees becoming thicker and more ominous as they neared the heart of Neil's ancestral lands. Jenna clutched the ancient map Neil had sent her digitally, the paper seeming out of place with its age-old markings and her modern smartphone beside it. Dr. Elias, ever the academic, marveled at the sight before them. These woods are old, perhaps older than any other in this region. There are stories about them, legends of spirits and creatures that make their home here. Many have entered, but few have returned. Marcus shot him an irritated glance. Not helping, Elias. Jenna took a deep breath. We don't have a choice. The heart of the forest is where the ritual needs to be performed. They began their trek, the forest swallowing them whole. Almost immediately, the world outside seemed to disappear, the sounds of nature amplified in the stillness. Birds whispered secrets from the treetops, and the wind murmured through the leaves. Hours seemed to pass, but the forest remained unchanged. Jenna felt the weight of countless eyes upon them. The deeper they went, the thicker the mists became, wrapping around them like a shroud. By midday, a sense of unease had settled over the group. Every rustle in the bushes, every distant cry seemed to carry a warning. They had the constant feeling of being watched, of being followed. Suddenly, Marcus froze, his hand shooting out to stop Jenna. Do you hear that? Jenna strained her ears, and then she heard it too. A soft, melodic humming, echoing between the trees. It was enchanting, drawing her towards its source. Jenna, don't. Marcus's voice pulled her back just as she was about to step into a clearing. Before them lay a serene pond, its waters perfectly still. On the opposite bank stood a figure, a woman draped in moss and leaves, her hair flowing like waterfalls. She was the source of the humming, her voice weaving a spell that tugged at their very souls. Dr. Elias whispered, awe in his voice, a forest nymph, a guardian of these woods. Legends speak of their songs luring travelers to their doom. Marcus shook his head, trying to clear the enchantment. We need to go around, avoid her. But as they attempted to backtrack, the forest seemed to shift. Paths disappeared, trees moved, and that haunting melody grew louder, more insistent. Jenna felt a pull, an urge to go to the nymph, to lose herself in that song. In a desperate move, Dr. Elias pulled out a pouch, murmuring an incantation as he threw a handful of the contents into the air, The space around them shimmered, and the song's pull weakened momentarily. "Move!" he shouted, and the three ran, putting as much distance between them and the nymph as they could. As the day wore on, the forest presented more challenges. They stumbled upon illusions, bridges that led to nothingness, trees with faces that moaned in agony, and shadows that seemed to dance just out of sight. Time and again, they relied on Dr. Elias's knowledge of ancient spells and wards. Nightfall found them exhausted, both physically and mentally. They set up a small camp, a protective circle drawn around them. But even within its confines, the forest's whispers reached them, tales of sorrow, of longing, of despair. Jenna, lying awake, thought of the mirror and the spirits trapped within. She wondered if the forest, too, was ensnared in a similar fate, its essence corrupted and tormented. She felt a hand on her shoulder and looked up to see Marcus. "We'll get through this," he murmured, his eyes reflecting the same determination she felt. The forest might be ancient, its secrets dark and deep, but they had a mission. And with the blood moon just days away, they couldn't afford to fail. Jenna nodded, drawing strength from Marcus's words. As they huddled together, the whispering woods around them, they knew the most challenging parts of their journey still lay ahead. But they were united, driven by a purpose that transcended their own fears. In the heart of the forest, the nymph watched, her song silenced for now. But her eyes, ancient and knowing, followed the trio, understanding that their fates were intertwined with the very soul of the woods. We hope you have enjoyed our storytelling offering tonight. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to be alerted of future weekly additions to our collections. Paranormal Untold Stories.